All right, very excited to talk to Ryan Nanni from the Shutdown Fullcast After Dark. You guys have obviously seen him there at Celebrity Hot Tub on Twitter. Ryan is joining us as a part of his 2023 mission to appear on as many podcasts as possible. So, Ryan, welcome first off. And second, where did this dream come from? Where did this start?
Like all great dreams of science and technology, boredom. I was just like, I think it was just realizing that being a guest on a podcast is so much easier than hosting a podcast or starting a podcast. So why wouldn't you just do that as much as you could?
Has that been the biggest takeaway from being a part of the Shutdown Fullcast?
Yes, 100%. 100%. And you'll note the Fullcast almost never has guests because we can't figure out how to do that, is largely what it turns on.
I'm trying to think. The only guest I can think of in recent memory was the professional uncle from Jeopardy.
Yes, Skip. Skip was on. Jess Smetana has been on, I think once or twice. But it's real. It feels like it's tempting fate every time. But if I go guest on somebody else's podcast, like now it's the difference between hosting dinner and going to a dinner party. I would love to go to a dinner party because I'm not doing the dishes, or if I am, it's because now I look like a good guy, like a good helper.
That is true. If you bring one, like, no matter how small it is, if you bring one thing to a dinner party, you've checked off your box, you've done your job, the host is appreciative. Yes, you don't have 100%. To worry about trying to make a bunch of different groups of people get along together.
No. You don't have to meal plan. You don't have to clean your house and your bathroom and all. Like, so basically, I've decided to embrace the audio version of being a guest at a dinner party rather than hosting a dinner party.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming to ours. I think we're at this point the third stop on your 2023 tour.
That is correct. Yeah.
All right, there we go. Early market entry, and I think the only non-TCU football podcast.
Also correct. So also correct. Yes.
Got the market cornered on that. Great timing for this, considering too you get to turn this into the college football playoff national championship circuit in a weird way.
Yes.
Although I feel like there's so much going on right now that feels tangentially college football that you guys will be sustained for a long time. Like, watching what's gone on with the U.S. men's national team 100%. Feels deeply college football.
It feels both simultaneously deeply college football. Like, if you said, somehow Arkansas boosters are involved in this, I'd be like 100%. And if it turned into like, and now Gio Reyna is on Auburn's staff, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. That tracks. But it also feels super European.
Yeah.
Like it's, I was texting friends about it yesterday, and it's like, this is the moment when like England's on notice. If you think America's not taking soccer seriously, go look at this.
I appreciated that the replies under every tweet that I saw about this were like, France isn't impressed. There's no sex tape involved in this.
But that's true of everything. Every piece of news that France consumes. It's like, no sex tape? We don't care if Kevin McCarthy wins Speaker of the House. Uninteresting. Boring. Move on.
Child's play.
Yes.
You find out your colleges have nuclear reactors on campus here? Nothing. A drop in the bucket.
Did someone have sex near the nuclear reactor? No. Move on. Yeah. Done.
Uninteresting, unserious program.
Unsexy. It's unsexy is what it is.
It is deeply unsexy, which, like, I don't know, that also feels like, because I was going to say Gio seemed like he would be next in line to find a place on Texas A&M staff at the rate that they're going, but that's also a deeply unsexy staff.
It is a deeply unsexy staff, yeah. On the one hand, I appreciate that Jimbo Fisher has at no point been like, well, I'm going to try to win the media war. I'm going to try to win people over. And he is also at the perfect program where nobody wants you to do that. Certain schools, if you go there, like, they kind of want you to be an ambassador for the school and sort of say like, hey, like, make people like us, or at least make people respect us. But at Texas A&M, it's like, nah, man, we're already a cult, so we just need you to be super culty with us. That's the important thing.
Yes, please win these football games at all costs. Like,
Yes.
we're like, and you're right, there is something, and God, I don't want to laud any of this, but at least they weren't trying to do this while also telling me that we are interested in, like, being, leaders of young men or teachers or any of the other normal rigmarole that we hear around these college programs. It's like, no, we might get pissed off when you insult our recruiting prowess by saying that we've been throwing bags of NIL money at these guys, but rest assured, we are just here to get the best possible football team on that field, however it looks.
That is correct. That is, yes. There is no, A&M is not like, you know what we're about first and foremost? Family values. They're about oil values. That's what they're about.
If your family's got oil, then we're about your values.
We value your family.
I feel like being a Texas A&M fan is basically just like being the human version of that Russell Westbrook eating the hot dog at the end of the bench gift. Because you can't have heard this news and been super excited, but you're like, oh, well, Jimbo at least acknowledged that his play calling is kind of a problem here. This is pretty good.
Yes. It weirdly represents progress, as messed up as that is. So
yes.
Good on you, A&M, for being you as hard as you can be.
No one is being them harder. The other bit of news that I saw that felt deeply full cast was seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene retweeting the 3-year Letterman post from a Georgia sports message board offering up the Gerald R. Ford Right to Tailgate Act for 2023, written by the 3-year Letterman in response to SoFi banning tailgating.
Yeah, it's I really appreciate that. Like, I think this is one way in which politicians are like the rest of us, where obviously Washington has its own main storyline that a lot of people are like, God, I would really like to not talk about that. So Brian Kemp also tweeted about this today, and he was like, when the college football playoff, when the championship comes to Georgia, we'll let you tailgate at the state capitol if we have to. And it's like the natural human inclination to be like, I want to talk about the sports thing so I don't have to talk about the real problems in my life. It's like, yep, totally get it. Absolutely get it.
I think we should be careful inviting more costumed people to Capitol buildings.
Yeah, but this way we're saying bring food at least. You know?
Exactly.
Like, if you're gonna invade a government building, bring snacks. That's all we're saying.
Government's like a dinner party, and if you come as a guest without bringing a snack, then what have you really done in this situation?
Extremely rude. Extremely rude.
Do you think there's any chance SoFi is able to keep, one, Georgia fans from tailgating, but also, two, TCU fans who have not been here before and, like, correct, who knows if they'll be back here anytime soon? Like, I don't know how you stop these people realistically.
I mean, I guess my thing is, like, I assume, without having done any research, that tailgating didn't start because teams and local governments were like, yes, we'd like you to bring a barbecue to a parking lot, you know? Yeah. So I suspect we are going to, you know what's probably going to happen is there's going to be a lot of like, look, if you can just keep it like, if I can just turn the other eye and I don't have to like really acknowledge the fullness of your tailgate, I won't say anything. I think it'll be that kind of, we're not letting you do it, but we're letting you do it.
Which, you know what? Like, I should say, I don't know the Georgia reputation for tailgating. I've been down to TCU's campus a couple times, and it's very much a rich person's tailgate.
Would you like to know the Georgia reputation for tailgating?
I would, please.
They leave their trash everywhere. That's the primary reputation for a tailgate at Athens. Is, look, it kind of runs the gamut. Like, you've got some super nice tailgates. You've got some just sort of like standard, we grabbed chicken fingers and beer literally this morning, whatever. But the consistent reputation is after the tailgate's done, it's just trash everywhere. Everywhere.
Oh, so this might be a them thing.
It could be a them thing. And as a Florida fan, I'm going to say it's a them thing.
Because this does seem, I know I've seen NFL fans or people say that normally there's a lot where you're allowed to tailgate, which I don't see Rams or Chargers fans really as the tailgating type. So again,
Correct.
Expectations versus the reality of this situation is probably a little different. But again, TCU fans, it's much more of the wine and cheese tailgate, at least from what I saw down there. It is, hey, you've got your separate tented area and this is where you do your stuff right here. And you got a little sign that lets everybody know who you are in that spot. That doesn't seem like it would be as offensive, but the trash seems to be a real issue in this, because I also imagine them riding into this tailgate I like Mad Max Fury Road style with someone on the front of a car just announcing their entrance to this. Or you know what? Actually, I shouldn't say that. That's how I bet California government and the people around this imagine SEC fans coming to a tailgate.
That's what an SEC tailgate looks like. Yes, correct. Yeah, and just like Mad Max, there's only so much water to go around. It's mostly not water.
Yes, it's so true. It's just whatever the metallics, I don't know, I guess fireball shots would be the metallic spray that sends them to meet the afterlife. It all tracks there. I want to run this by you because I know the full cast has a fraught relationship with my alma mater, but I can't help but feel that 2022 TCU is just 2012 Notre Dame with a cool drug fraud.
Wow.
Because I said, close your eyes and imagine you have a team that was unranked to start the season, who has won a bunch of inexplicable close games. Yeah. They are led by one particularly dominant unit that has the Heisman runner-up on that side of the ball, and they are facing the defending national champion from the SEC coming off an absolute classic of a game in the game prior. Now open your eyes. Okay.
Here is the distinction. And this is, I think, important for both of these programs, but we'll talk about TCU to start. TCU, the 2012 Notre Dame team is trying to continue a tradition. It's trying to continue a thing that it's always been. It changes and it evolves from coach to coach, but like the baseline is always there. The decision to move on from Gary Patterson and go to Sonny Dykes was a big break. Like that was basically saying we will abandon the person who built this, the person who shepherded it through multiple conferences, if you count the conference they joined but never played in before they went to the Big 12.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing you do lightly or easily. And the fact that it has worked so well is, I think, the thing that makes it different. Also, there's no Purdue on this schedule that you say, oh, they should have lost to. Who's the Purdue that they should have lost to?
For them,
TCU,
Baylor. I think Purdue Pitt was the one you're thinking of.
Oh yes, Pitt is the one I'm thinking of.
Pitt was Baylor was their Pitt is my assertion here.
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess neither of them won a conference championship either. So
the stars are all aligning. But no, you are right. Like the Sonny Dykesification of this program and the just insane vibe shift. Because one year, that was Brian Kelly's third year at Notre Dame.
Yes.
You had all of the theoretical ground laying and the things that go on normally in that. So that part is definitely different, is that they were somehow able to just shock, which was largely the same roster as a 5-7 team last year into this moment.
Right. And not just a 5-7 team last year, but a team that really since that first college football playoff year where they and Baylor get left out in favor of Ohio State, like had not really bubbled up to that level or even close to it. It had spent a lot of time sort of in the like, we make bowl games, we don't make a lot of noise. And for them to sort of pull the plug, I think there's something very interesting about that. I bring that up because Georgia is obviously more further down the road, but did the same thing when they said, we're done with Mark Richt.
Yeah.
Like Georgia had more of a program history at that point, had won national titles, had, won the SEC titles, etc. And so Mark Richt wasn't necessarily the guy, but he was a guy.
Right, like they were winning 9 games a year down that stretch when they made the decision. It wasn't like it had bottomed out in the last couple of years the way it had with Gary.
No. And the decision to sort of say, like, we think we can do better than this has obviously paid off. has obviously
Yes.
like and it makes me weirdly, and this is not a team I expected to talk about today. It makes me feel really optimistic for Wisconsin because I feel like they are the team that is sort of trying that now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's honestly what Michigan was getting ready to do when they almost fired Jim Harbaugh, was saying, hey, all those winning seasons falling short of being our rival. Wisconsin's a really interesting one, too, because we talked about them in the landscape of open jobs this offseason, and you've got a place that is deeply serious about football. Resource-wise, I don't know if they're going to be at the top of the heap. They're not going to challenge Ohio State in the Big Ten, but they care about it enough, and Luke Fickell appears to be cut of that cloth where he comes from winning like that. So it does make a lot of sense.
Now, the problem is for every TCU, there's the cautionary tale of an Auburn. Oof. Auburn dumping Gus Malzahn to go with a coach that within a year they were like, what if we just immediately tried to fire him in the offseason, failed, and then let him have the most miserable lame duck season possible? What if we did that? So I would advise Wisconsin not to do that. That's my expert opinion.
I would advise Wisconsin not to adopt warring booster factions and attempt a coup on their head coach and all the above. That would be a nice way for them to do things. You mentioned the Georgia part of this, though, because now after that rise, they've also been tapped as everyone's saying it's theirs now. College football belongs to Georgia. They are the new Alabama. All these different things that we've put on them. We saw this year already, like Alabama did not go without challenge during that entire run. And so what Ohio State, a program with similar resources, similar traditions, did in that game shouldn't be altogether surprising. But as we walk into an expanded college football playoff era and stuff coming up like that, is it going to be damn near impossible for some, like it already should be in a lot of ways, but for Georgia to even get close to what Nick and that Alabama team were able to do for a decade?
I guess it depends on what you define that as. If it's sort of be season in, season out, the undisputed number one, but not always win the title, I think they can do that. I think if you're talking about the number of championships that they won and the number of times they made it to the national championship game, that will become default harder. Some of that is, while Georgia plays right now, I would say still in the easier division in the SEC, Tennessee is making big strides. South Carolina is proving to be feisty in interesting ways. Kentucky has been feisty in the past, isn't. Florida, I don't want to talk about. And you still have to play the West. And while the West this year was not necessarily the same division it has been, I'm not ready to sort of pour dirt on it and say you're done. You're absolutely done. Because, for a long stretch of Alabama dominating, they could get to the SEC title game and sort of say, what garbage has the East thrown up for us to chew through? It wasn't, these were not dominant or consistent times in that division. So that was never a speed bump. And I think for Georgia, it would be foolish to say, oh, the West is the thing they're going to run over. So the fact that you still have that as the hurdle is to me one of the key differences between the two. But like everything else, how they build the program, how they run it, how they recruit, what they do and don't do transfer portal wise, what they do schematically, it all feels very like, oh, okay, this is the next evolution of what Nick built in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, it feels only right that after so long, one of his former assistants finally stepped up and was like, no, I actually can replicate the process over here.
And like, rightly, it's the one who stayed the longest. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that I was talking to my colleague Stephen Godfrey about recently. The thing that Nick Saban doesn't always get, credit is the wrong word, but I think a key part of his decision-making is he picks his spots. Like when he decided to take the LSU job in the first place, it was all based on how much per capita NFL talent Louisiana was putting into the league. That's a tactical decision. A lot of these coaches who have left Alabama to go other places are going places like Tennessee when other coaches have taken it, for instance. That's not a good example because it's not well, let's use McElwain taking the Florida job, for instance.
Right.
Florida is a talent-rich state, but it's not a state you can lock the border down.
Mm.
And it is a state where Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, plenty of places are going to be pulling from. So I think Kirby made a tactical decision to go to a program where he was like, this is not a rebuild. Under Mark Richt, they had not bottomed out. And there are enough things that I can change and optimize that with enough time, and it only took, 2 or 3 years, we can start making this run the way it needs to run. And other assistants have taken much more challenging fare on, I would say.
Yeah, it did what, I mean, we talk about some coaches who were like, honestly, to bring up Florida, Billy Napier at the G5 level was always that example of, he could have jumped and taken any job, but he kind of knew I can hold this Louisiana thing in place for long enough to wait for the one I really want and jump there. This is sort of the Power 5 version of that. It also has, in its own way, given birth to what we see now, which is the bloated, disproportioned staff and team pictures before every season, where you see double the amount of analysts that you do uniformed players in every picture. Somehow making their way there, as Kirby just took definitely that model from Nick and said, no, it's not quite Nick Saban's School of Wayward Boys yet, but I'm sure it's got the potential to become that.
Where you're like, is that a former NFL head coach making like $63,000 a year as an analyst? What's happening here?
What the hell? Oh yeah, it's coming like a freight train. I guess I bring that all up though relative to the expanded playoff, because I guess with this season, Tulane winning the Cotton Bowl, we get a bunch of results all over the place that kind of seem indicative of go back to Cincinnati making the playoff last year, newer faces showing up. I mean, hell, you brought up the West, Brian Kelly getting LSU to the SEC championship in year one, Tennessee being ranked number one for a bunch of this season. I don't want to overreact to 1 year too much because, man, we're so new in the portal. We see how quickly that's going to affect and shock some programs. But does any part of this feel like, in the wake of Alabama handing that baton, that we might have a sport that is healthy enough with enough teams in range to make a 12-team playoff more interesting than I would have thought it would have been 2 or 3 years ago?
The boring lawyer answer I'll give you is maybe. It really just depends, because I think, every time there's a proposed or real playoff change, every college football writer does the thing where it's like, well, let's apply this to the last 10 years and see what it would have looked like. And some years it looks really cool and fun, and some years it's like, why is this 4-loss team in the playoff? To me, the interesting thing is that this is the first time that I can remember where college football has made a change to the postseason that is not expressly about finding a deserving champion. The decision to go to a 1 versus 2 in the first place in the BCS was about sort of we want to settle the championship on the field. The decision to go to 4 from the BCS was about, we think there are deserving aspirants to a championship that are not getting a shot. Nobody is making the case that we need to go to 12 because every year there are 12 or even 6 teams that deserve a shot at the title. That said, if you put that to one side and just say, well, we don't care about that, we just want it to be entertaining, I think pro sports prove that, sometimes it will be. The Beastquake game where the Seahawks beat the Saints, that's the 7-9 Seahawks, if I remember. By no measure do you look at that and say this is a team that quote unquote deserves to be contending for a Super Bowl, but it's still a fun game. That's sort of the trade-off here, is you are giving up the pretense of, oh, this is only for the most special boys who get to participate in this. But you are going to see some results that are going to be entertaining and mess things up, because we know from the regular season, that's just how college football works.
If you want entertaining and will sometimes mess you up, check out the Shutdown Fullcast with Ryan Nanni and the rest of the gang there. Email him, ryan.nanni@gmail.com. Have him on your podcast as a dinner party guest. Help him towards his 2023 goal. Ryan, we appreciate the time today, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man.
Boom. Money in the bank.